The purpose of this record is to show you how to use your imagination to achieve your every desire. Most men are totally unaware of the creative power of imagination and invariably bow before the dictates of facts and accept life on the basis of the world without. But when you discover this creative power within yourself, you will boldly assert the supremacy of imagination and put all things in subjection to it. When the man speaks of God in man, he's totally unaware that this power, called God in man, is man's imagination. This is the creative power in man. There is nothing under heaven that is not plastic as potter's clay to the touch of the shaping spirit of imagination. Now, this whole record is technique. I want to show you today how to put your wonderful imagination right into the feeling of your wish fulfilled and let it remain there and fall asleep in that state. And I promise you, from my own experience, you will realize the state in which you sleep if you could actually feel yourself right into the situation of your fulfilled desire and continue therein until you fall asleep. As you feel yourself right into it, remain in it until you give it all the tones of reality, until you give it all the sensory vividness of reality. As you do it in that state, quietly fall into sleep, and in a way you will never know. You could never consciously devise the means that would be employed. You will find yourself moving across a series of events, leading you towards the objective realization of this state. Now, here's a practical technique. The first thing you do, you must know exactly what you want in this world. When you know exactly what you want, make as lifelike a representation as possible of what you would see and what you would touch, what you would do, were I physically moving in such a state. For example, suppose I wanted a home, but I had no money. But still I know what I want. I, without taking anything into consideration, would make as lifelike a representation of the home that I would like, with all the things in it I would want. And then this night, as I would go to bed, I would, in a drowsy, sleepy state, a state that borders upon sleep, I would imagine that I'm actually in such a house, and that I would like to step off the bed, and I would like to step on the floor of that house. Were I to leave this room, I would enter the room that is adjacent to my imagined room in that house. While I'm touching the furniture, feeling it to be solidly real, and while I'm moving from one room to another in my imaginary house, I would go sound asleep in that state. And I know that in a way that I could not consciously devise, I would realize my house. I've seen it work time and time again. If I wanted a promotion in my business, I would ask myself, what additional responsibilities would be mine were I to be given this great promotion? What would I do? What would I say? And what would I see? And how would I act? And then in my imagination, I will begin to see and touch and do and act as I would outwardly see and touch and act were I in that position. If I now desired a mate of my life, were I now in search of some wonderful girl or some wonderful man, what would I actually find myself doing that would imply that I have found my state? For instance, suppose now I was a lady, and one thing I would definitely do, I would wear a wedding ring. I would take my imaginary hands, and I would feel the ring that I would imagine to be there. I would keep on feeling it until it seemed to me to be solidly real. I would give it all the sensory vividness I'm capable of giving anything. And while I'm feeling my imaginary ring, which implies I am married, I would sleep. Into practical language, it would be this. While sitting in my chair, I would feel myself right into the situation of my fulfilled desire. And having felt myself into that state, I would not let it go. I would keep that mood alive, and in that mood, I would sleep. You know, people are totally unaware of this fantastic power of the imagination. The secret of it is to center your imagination in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and remain bearing. For in our capacity to live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled lies our capacity to live the more abundant life. Most of us are afraid to imagine ourselves as important and noble individuals, secure in our contribution to the world just because at the very moment that we start our assumption, reason and our senses deny the truth of our assumption. We seem to be in the grip of an unconscious urge, which makes us cling desperately to the world of familiar things and resist all that threatens to tear us away from our familiar and seemingly safe moorings. But I appeal to you to try it, and if you try it, you will discover this great wisdom of the ancients. You see, imagination puts us inwardly in touch with a world of states. These states are existent. They are present now. But they are mere possibilities while we think of them. But they become overpoweringly real when we think from them and dwell in them. You know, there's a wide difference between thinking of what you want in this world and thinking from what you want. An old friend of mine taught it to me. He turned to the 14th of John, and this is what he read. In my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself. There you may be also. He explained to me that the central character of the Gospels was the human imagination, that a mansion was not a place in some heavenly house, but simply my desire. If I would make a living representation of the state desired, and then enter that state and abide in that state, I would realize it. At the time, I wanted to make a trip to the island of Barbados in the West Indies, but I had no money. He explained to me if I would that night, as I slept in New York City, assume that I was sleeping in my earthly father's house in Barbados, and go to sleep in that state, that I would realize my trip. Well, I took him at his word, and I tried it for 1 month. Night after night, as I fell asleep, I assumed I was sleeping in my father's home in Barbados. At the end of my month, an invitation from my family came, inviting me to spend the winter in Barbados. I sailed for Barbados the early part of December of that year. From then on, I knew I had found this Savior in myself. The old man told me that it would never fail. Even after it happened, I could hardly believe that it would not have happened anyway. That's how strange this whole thing is. On reflection, it happened so naturally, you begin to tell yourself, well, it would have happened anyway. And you quickly recover from this wonderful experience of yours. It never failed me. If I would give it the mood, the imagined mood, the sensory vividness, I could tell you unnumbered case histories to show you how it works. But in essence, it's simple. You simply know what you want. When you know what you want, you are thinking of it. That's not enough. You must now begin to think from it. Well, how could I think from it? I'm sitting here, and I desire to be elsewhere. How could I, while sitting here physically, put myself in imagination at a point in space removed from this room and make that real to me, quite easily. My imagination puts me in touch inwardly with that state. I imagine that I am actually where I desire to be. How can I tell that I am there? There's only one way to prove that I am. For what a man sees when he describes his world is as he describes it relative to himself. So what the world looks like depends entirely upon where I stand when I make my observation. So, as if I describe my world, it is relative to that point in space. I imagine that I am occupied, that I must be there. Not there physically, no, but I am there in imagination. And my imagination is my real self. And where I go in imagination, I make it real. There I shall go in the flesh also. When in the state I fall asleep, it is done. I have never seen it fail. So this is the simple technique on how to use your imagination to realize your every objective. Here is the way a lady wisely used this law. 2 years ago, she was ordered out of her daughter-in-law's home. For 2 years, there was no correspondence. She'd sent her grandson at least 24 presents in that interval, but not one was ever acknowledged. Having heard the story of revision, this is what she did as she retired at night. She mentally constructed 2 letters. One she imagined coming from her grandson and the other coming from her daughter-in-law. In these letters, they expressed deep affection and wondered why she had not called to see them. This she did for 7 consecutive nights, holding in her imaginary hand the letter she imagined she had received, and reading these letters over and over until it aroused within her the satisfaction of having heard. Then she slept. On the 8th day, she received a letter from the daughter-in-law. On the inside were 2 letters, one from her grandson and one from her daughter-in-law. They practically duplicated the imaginary letters that this grandmother had written to herself 8 days before. This art can be used in any department of your life. Take the matter of health. Suppose you are ill. Bring before your mind's eye the image of a friend. Put upon that face an expression which implies that he or she sees in you that which you want the whole world to see. Just imagine he is saying to you that he's never seen you look better, and you reply, I have never felt better. Suppose your foot was injured. Then do this. Construct mentally a drama which implies that you are walking. You're doing all things that you would do if the foot was normal. And do it over and over until it takes on the tones of reality. Whenever you do in your imagination that which you would like to do in the outer world, that you will do in the outer world. The one requisite is to arouse your attention in a way to such an intensity that you become wholly absorbed in the revision action. You will experience an expansion and refinement of the senses. By this imaginative exercise, eventually achieve vision in the inner world. The abundant life promised us is ours to enjoy now, but not until we have the sense of the Creator in our imagination can we experience it. Persistent imagination centered in the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the secret of all successful operations.